Alrighty guys, it is Qaaman here today, and we are continuing our finals recap, focusing specifically more on the San Antonio side of everything else that took place in this series. So in today's video, James and I will be analyzing from the perspective of the San Antonio Spurs why they beat the Miami Heat, what went in their favor the most, and overall statistically through our memories, why they ultimately defeated my favorite team in the finals. So James, I'll let you begin off by talking about some of the major factors.
I would have to say that in this series, I think whenever I talk about the series, because I did my own segment on it, my own individual account, I felt the difference might have been the level of competition as well. Because if you look at the Heat, they kind of strolled into the finals pretty easily without much effort. And you look at the Spurs, they had a lot tougher of a time because they had to play Dallas. They had to go against Oklahoma City. They had to play Portland. And if you just look at the West this year in general, there were seven teams in the West that won 50 games, at least 50. In the East, there were only two, Indiana and Miami. And so the Heat, I don't think were ready for the kind of a competition the Spurs were going to bring to them. And also, in this series, just in general, all the players in the Spurs stepped up. Duncan played well, Parker played well, Kawhi Leonard played well, Ginobili played much better than last year. Danny Green had his moments, Patty Mills did, Boris Diaw. They just, as a team, played more efficiently. And it was going to take a Herculean effort by the big three to be able to stay in this game, in this series, because if LeBron, Wade, and Bosh weren't going to get a combined like 80 points a game, then, you know, the Heat were going to be in serious trouble.
James, also I want you to, it's so funny when you're mentioning all the players who played well, you actually forgot to mention Kawhi Leonard. How do you think the emergence of Kawhi Leonard impacted the series for the Spurs?
It was a big reason. It was a big thing that he played well, because last year didn't play well in the finals. This year played really well because, again, it was mature. He's maturing as a player, and also the fact that he was such a force on offense and defense, and the fact that he did a really nice job of guarding LeBron James, because LeBron in the playoffs has had habits of going off on for big games against some of the better teams, like against the Celtics we alluded to in a previous segment, and also, you know, we have to discuss against some games against the Pacers where he's played well. Kawhi Leonard did a really good job of keeping him in check.
Well, I think one thing that, just looking strictly from the San Antonio Spurs, is, you know, we're going to go more into the Heat in the next segment. If you actually look at the San Antonio Spurs, one thing that stands out is the balance of scoring. And we all know that, you know, scoring isn't everything in basketball. You can look at the even more specific statistics like defensive ratings, efficient field goal percentage. The San Antonio Spurs as a team, they basically fight and work hard to make the most efficient shot that they could possibly make. Popovich has glued into their minds what their resume has to be. And essentially it is pass the ball, pass the ball, pass the ball, pass the ball, wear the other team out. And the thing is, James, from analyzing a basketball game, what does that do to a team? Well, let's just be honest. You can pass a ball faster than a person can move, right? And
yes,
a lot of times San Antonio really didn't have to double team LeBron James. They didn't fall for the same trap that they did last season, because if you remember, last season they put a lot of double teams on LeBron and forced LeBron to shoot jump shots. Now, the Spurs still almost won the series even using that strategy, but they kind of relied more on Kawhi to play man-to-man defense against LeBron, and they kind of, you know, trusted Kawhi to really slow LeBron down on himself so everybody can play man-to-man, and that way the Miami Heat would have more problems for themselves. I think if Dwayne Wade, obviously that's something the Spurs did. I'm trying to stay strictly with the Spurs over here. What I also think, I mean, I love my Heat. I've always been a fan. I think it was also coaching too. You got to give, you know, Popovich credit.
Greg Popovich has been coaching against some of the best teams in the league for the better part of almost 20 years. I mean, he had there were the mid to late 90s. You had the Pacers, the Knicks. You had also the some other good teams in the West. Early in the 2000s, you had the Lakers, and then you had the Pistons come up, and then, of course, the Heat, the Mavericks, the Celtics, the Lakers again. And then early in this decade, you got the Heat, the Pacers, even if you want to even talk other teams in the West, the Thunder. He's had to go against it all. He's seen everything that you could potentially do on a basketball court, and he knows how to counter it, and he knows how to put points up on just about anybody. He's just been in this game so long, and he's just so experienced.
Well, James, to add to what you were saying, you said that, he's seen so much about basketball. Not just that, he invents new ways of playing the game of basketball. That's one thing that Popovich has. He's not a conservative coach. He is willing to make adjustments, and he makes more frequent adjustments than the Miami Heat. I think that definitely killed the Heat in many ways, because the Miami Heat were making drastic adjustments out of nowhere. Like, Michael Beasley didn't play any playoff games, if I remember correctly, throughout the entire playoff series. And, putting in Popovich, putting in, Michael Beasley out of nowhere just out of desperation and benching Chalmers, it just disrupts the entire team. And if you look at the Spurs have the type of guys that you can just put in and out of rotations because of how well Popovich's system works. But James, I think what the viewers would really like to hear here is, you were talking off camera. We were talking football and basketball, and you were talking about that whole battle-hardened ideology. Whereas the Green Bay Packers of 2012 got beaten down by the they got beaten down by the New York Giants in the playoffs because, the Packers were resting all those weeks and stuff. And, looking at the Miami Heat and also looking at the San Antonio Spurs, specifically the Spurs since, they own this segment, the San Antonio Spurs, they didn't have to play a single player on their roster for more than 30 minutes throughout the regular season, and they kept their team fresh. And at the same time, the Miami Heat rested a lot of their players. So how would you say the San Antonio Spurs and their battle, hardened ideology played into this series?
Again, it just goes to the fact that this team has better depth, and the fact that everybody on this team has contributed, and the fact that it's not so top-heavy. You've got everybody. It's like a rounded team. The Heat are top-heavy, and they have to play their guys more, and over the course of the season, that wears on them. It really does. And I think you just alluded to it there. And also the fact that in the West, in the regular season, the Spurs had tougher games, not just the Heat. The Heat actually, they played an inferior conference, and they had an inferior conference record to the Spurs. So the Spurs played better against better teams. So that also had to do with it as well.
That is definitely true, James. One thing that it's kind of funny. You said that 7 out of the 8 teams in the East were, 50-win teams. Dallas was the only team that wasn't a 50-win. They won 49 games, and look how far they pushed San Antonio. As a matter of fact, if you think about it, that was the most competitive series for San Antonio. If you look at, the other teams, I think, honestly, another factor that we have to put into here why the Spurs won the championship, and it really hurts me to say this as a Heat fan, even though I love my team, I think it's because the Spurs felt that we robbed them of a championship last year. And that affects mental strength, because I think the Spurs felt the entire season that they were better than us. They felt that they were a better team.
I wouldn't say that last year they were a better team. I think the better team won the series, both series between these two teams. I think the better team won both times. But again, revenge is such a powerful motivator in sports. It really is. If some guy knocks you down, you want to knock him down and let him feel how you felt. Because it's a thing in any sport. Football, basketball, hockey, baseball, tennis, soccer, you name it. Anytime you lose to somebody, you want to get them back.
So mental strength definitely played a factor here. I definitely think all of the things that we discussed in this video are major factors for why San Antonio ultimately beat the Miami Heat. And James and I are going to move on to the very next segment. So please remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. And remember, as I always say, to have a great day, guys, and to stay tuned for our very next part of this finals recap discussion.